And we know it is one of the highest forms of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. And that's what this election is about. And about the promise of America.
We're run by stupid people. Stupid people. And we found that out at the debate with Joe. How did that work out? And we're going to find it out again on Tuesday night. Is anybody going to be watching?
Well, that's one way to set it up. It is set to be a debate for the ages. Okay, maybe not as consequential as the last debate, which was the beginning of the end for then Democratic nominee Joe Biden. But it will be the first time the Democrats' new nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris, faces off against her rival for the presidency, former President Donald Trump. Let's bring back the front bench to talk about what to expect. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. Kathleen, we were together for the last debate. You called it. This could be the beginning of the end for Joe Biden in that moment. How big are the stakes for this one in your view?
I think they're huge. There's only 56 days left to the election. Kamala Harris has been the candidate only for a few weeks. Every moment counts. And actually, we just saw a poll today out of the New York Times that shows that Trump's back in the lead nationally. I mean, it's just one poll, but it's tight, and he's in the lead. And I think that's concerning. Why? Because we've always said on your radio show and elsewhere, Vassy, that the most effective kind of framing that Trump can use against Kamala is that she's just like Biden. And he's been effective on using that attack on immigration, on the economy, on jobs. He's trying to paint Kamala just like Biden, just like Lazy Joe. And it's working. And she hasn't fully introduced herself to voters yet. I mean, don't get me wrong, Democratic Convention was, amazing for politicos like me to watch. It was a great debut, but it was very controlled. She hasn't been in these kind of uncontrolled situations yet. And so I actually think tomorrow night's debate is actually really consequential. And she's got to start actually talking about her biography, who she is, appealing to voters. She's losing right now among older voters and particularly white voters. And that's where Trump is picking up. And so she's got to speak to all of those voters, get some of that working class white vote back in, and really try to move the needle and letting voters in America know who she is and why they should vote for her.
I feel like, Laura, over the weekend, you could also see there was a lot of expectation setting going on because they have constantly talked about, and understandably so, her prosecutorial background and her sort of skills in that vein. But a lot of her delegates, like Josh Shapiro, various governors across the states, they were going on Sunday programs and other political programs saying, hey, don't underestimate Trump. He actually is a skilled debater. He, can say a lot of things in the moment that he may not actually mean or that he won't follow through on, but certainly appeal to the audience that's watching in that moment or in that time. What do you think about the sort of relative stakes for each of them tomorrow night?
I think the stakes are huge for Kamala Harris because, as noted, she's much more of an unknown entity. I mean, we don't really know a ton about her policy positions on a variety of issues. We don't know how she reacts in the moment. And I think there's nothing that Donald Trump can do or say that really surprises or shocks people anymore. I think you've kind of learned to expect the unexpected with him. And, he can be quite cutting, to put it mildly, when he wants to be. And it will be very interesting to see how she reacts on her feet, how she goes up against his attacks and kind of where those sparks fly. But I think certainly for her, the stakes are much, much higher. She's a much more unknown entity to America than Donald Trump has been for the past few years.
I do think, though, when it comes to Trump himself, it's been interesting to watch all the reporting, Shakir, around how his advisors on the campaign have constantly warned him not to get too personal and how he just cannot help himself. And I imagine in an arena like the debate where you do have a much broader audience beyond his base, who that kind of rhetoric might resonate with, if he can't help himself again, that's a potential vulnerability on his side, too, I think.
Yeah, Trump's lack of discipline is obviously going to be a massive concern. But I think to what Kathleen and even Laura said earlier, the fact that Kamala is not really known to a lot of people, we know Donald Trump's going to go on rants, but if he can bring those rants back to some kind of key themes around whether it's, Kamala Harris is too liberal or, flip-flopping on policy or even presenting her as potentially a weak leader, I think he can do pretty well in the debate. Because I think it's built in that Donald Trump is going to be kind of off the wall in some of the things that he says. So I think people are pricing that into his presentation. But he has to have some level of discipline in terms of how he frames Ms. Harris moving forward. I just think for Kamala Harris, if she can go on the offensive, I think she'll be just fine, right? at the end of the day, Donald Trump is a convicted felon. His position on abortion changes almost every day, if not every hour. And I think for her, if she can just like even put him in his place at certain times in the debate, I think a lot of people will get behind that as someone who can, check this force of Donald Trump. But if she gets bogged down in defending, her policy reversals over the years, it's not going to be a good situation or a good look for her.
How do you, what kind of advice would you give, Dan, in that vein? How do you constantly pivot to where you are on the offense rather than consistently defending yourself? Obviously, the moderators will play a role in that, but it can be kind of limited, too, as we saw in the last debate.
Yeah, well, I mean, she has to land some pretty direct punches tomorrow in order for the post-debate narrative to be fixated on how successful she was or how weak Trump was, or frankly, make the post-debate national conversation about Donald Trump, right? That is success for Kamala Harris on the other side of this debate. And so there's lots of ways to get there. You could try and survive. You could try and do it sort of boring, quiet, or you could go on the offense like Shakir talks about and really land some harsh punches. The only way she wins, though, whatever strategy she takes, is if the national conversation is on Donald Trump on the other side of it. She will win this election if, on election day, if it's a referendum on Donald Trump. If on election day or if post-debate, the national conversation is about Kamala Harris, and if on election day this is a referendum on her and her record or whether or not she's too liberal or not, she will lose. And so I think this is a very consequential debate, to Kathleen's point, in that it will chart the path for the next 8 weeks. It will chart the path towards the election day question that voters are going to have on their minds when they show up to vote. And I think both candidates have a chance to really cement the position that they'll be in for those weeks ahead.
I am most curious to see, because we know, based on everything everyone said, plus what Trump has said so far, that he is going to very much focus on the Biden record and her association with that, how she delineates between what she'll pursue, Kathleen, and what that record actually is.
Yeah, but that's exactly why Dan is right. She's got to focus voters' attention and gaze back onto Trump, why they dislike him, why they don't want him in office again, and remind them of some of his failures, economic failures as president. But conversely, what I'm worried about is Kamala, too much of her prosecutor self coming out tomorrow. I want to hear about her jobs when she was in high school and her life, more of her bio. So she has to carefully weave in. She has to, because she has to let voters get to know who she is, because they don't know her yet, and they have to like her. You have to like who you want to vote for. Actually, it's very rare.
Mostly women.
But you do, and also, and she, as prosecutors, she might possibly go too far and look and kind of create be too strong, which is crazy to say.
Oh my
but
gosh.
but she has to dial that
so
back in the
depressing,
same way that Trump has to dial back his emotional regulation. But she needs to tell the story of who she is and why she wants this job.
Okay, guys, there's so much exciting stuff to look for. I appreciate it. Thanks for a great discussion. Our wonderful front bench, Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone.